Alright. Okay. So here's where we left off. Fundamental concerns, speculating on a future. Remember that?
Yes.
Did anybody have any more thoughts about that, or speculate on any kind of future, or see anything about that?
Sorry, I was absent yesterday and I don't know what is the conversation.
Oh, that's right, she doesn't know that. Okay. Fundamental concerns, like what you're concerned with for yourself in your life. He has concerns. People of Ukraine have concerns. Yeah? Okay. Now, there's a future that could be created that wasn't going to happen anyway. We talked about that. A future that wasn't going to happen anyway. So you don't need leadership to manage something, but you need leadership when there's a future that wasn't going to happen anyway. One of the things you identified is if Ukraine is left to drift the way it's going, it probably won't be prosperous. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. But so it's going to take leadership to create a future that wasn't going to happen anyway. And there's fundamental concerns of the relevant parties. So the relevant parties in this case would be all the people that live in Ukraine. A person that lives in Canada would not be a relevant party, okay? All right, so you watched the video before at some point.
I'll watch this weekend.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So that's what we're working on. And so now we're going to cover the concept, the third aspect here of the second element, concept. The concept of leadership, it's one of the things that's in the contextual framework. All right? So, they're just saying what I just said a minute ago. I'm hooked into the internet next door and it wants to update my laptop. I hope it doesn't do that. Okay, reviewing what we said about leader and leadership as concepts. Now we will clarify the following words and phrases used in distinguishing leader and leadership as concepts. As concepts, leader and leadership exist in the temporal domain of a created future. A future that fulfills the concerns of the relevant parties that the leader and those being led come to live into. Which future gives them being and action in the present, consistent with realizing that future. So do you understand temporal domain?
Yes.
I know, but they weren't here. Do you understand temporal domain? Yeah? What temporal means having to do with time, as in the future. Okay. Clarifying the words and phrases in leader and leadership as concept. As it says in the foregoing slide, future is the domain of leader and leadership. Dealing with the future is central and is, in a sense, as you will see, what being a leader and the effective exercise of leadership are fundamentally about. Consequently, we will spend a good deal of time on getting clear about the actual nature of future and the effect that different kinds of futures have on people's being and action in the present. Third aspect, concept, the future. Transforming your frame of reference for future. In order to be effective in dealing with this central issue in being a leader and the effective exercise of leadership, you will have to deconstruct your existing frame of reference for future. And then create a new frame of reference for future. One that provides you with the kind of access to future that leaves you with power in dealing with the future. Take future exactly as we will present it. And without comparing or relating it to anything you already know about the future, get yourself clear exactly what it says, and then consider what it says as a realm of possibility. Treat anything we say about future that is at first counterintuitive for you like the first line in a joke, even if it isn't allowed by your wall of bricks. By the way, your wall of bricks is your ideas, your point of view, your opinions, your judgments, and evaluations, right? And therefore makes no sense to you. Take what is stated exactly as it is stated. That is, create it for yourself as a possibility, like you do with the first lines in a joke. You know, we talked about this the other day, the first lines. You know, when you start a joke, you would say something like, well, the alligator walked into a bar down here on Contextual. And you don't say, there's no alligators in Contextual, and besides, they don't walk, they crawl, right? So you take the first line of a joke as though it's the way it is. So that's what you'll do here. The future. Given people's ordinary frame of reference for a future, they don't often think about the fact that there are different kinds of futures. In fact, there are many different kinds of futures. For example, there's a future as goal. That is a future toward which one is working or striving. There is also a future as hoped for or pipe dream, and future as feared or worried about, and future as to be avoided. One kind of future that does not exist is future as certain. The future is never certain. The future always exists only as a possibility. But the future that exerts the most force on the present is future as given by the past. That is, a future that is extrapolated or projected from the past, a future that is based on an extension of the trajectory established by the way the past has unfolded up to the present. Do you understand this word trajectory?
Mm-hmm.
Good. While people do have various kinds of possible futures they think about, or worry about, or hope for, or work towards, or strive for, the one that shapes them and their actions in the present is the future into which they are living. The reason the future given by the past usually has the most force in people's lives rather than the other possible futures is because that is the future that they are most likely to be actually living into. Because that's the future that they're most likely to be living into. You okay? Got that?
Yeah.
All right. While people may consciously have hopes and dreams and worries and doubts and goals and strivings regarding the future, the brain, below the level of consciousness, only has patterns from the past from which to predict the future. And the brain shapes a person's way of being and action in the present to be consistent with realizing the brain's predicted future. In fact, neuroscience studies confirm that brain activity selects an action, we already covered this, right? Even before the person experiences consciously choosing that action. This explains why, for the most part, life for most people is business as usual. They do more of what they have done, but that is just more of the past. Or they may do what they've done in the past, but better. However, better than the past is still more of the past. Better than the past is only a reshaping of what they have done in the past. And from time to time, people even do something different from what they've done in the past. When people talk about doing something different, they have to have in mind something from which it is different. And that something from which it is different is the past. So even different from the past is an extension of the past. That is, different is some variation of the past, and therefore still connected to the past. While life is sometimes better than the past and sometimes worse than the past, it is virtually always connected to the past. When people talk about having changed, they have in mind some past from which they've changed. In fact, to change, you have to have something from which you changed. And the something from which you changed is the past. So even when you change, that is still connected to the past.
And don't we have to live just out here without past and future and all that stuff?
Well, so how is this related to being out here? Is that your question?
No, just why are we talking about the past? The past is unreal, and the future is unreal too. There is no past and there is no future. There is just the moment right here in here. So aren't we supposed to, in leadership, to be out here and to do our job that we have to do?
Yes. Now you're taking everything that I've said like the first line of a joke. The alligator walked into the bar, right?
I just, in some point of I just started to take it not like a job, just serious.
Right.
Okay.
But you can see the validity of this like a possibility.
Yes.
Because this is how we live life,
Mhm.
as an extension of the past. That's how you know to come to this class and to walk through that door. Because you have patterns in your brain that tell you what a door is and the classroom is, and you recognize all these people in here because you now have patterns in your brain that tell you this. So the past is giving you constantly your present.
Okay. Okay, thank you for returning me my time.
Okay, thank you for saying that. It's a good question. In fact, neuroscientists consider that the evolutionary survival value of the brain storing memories of the past is purely their value in predicting the future. And the brain initiates those ways of being and acting in the present that are most likely to ensure success, which for the brain is the realization of the past-derived predicted future. This is the way our brains evolve to ensure best survival. So you and your friend are walking in the savannas in Africa millions of years ago, and there's a twig snaps, and the saber-toothed tiger eats your friend. And you're scared and upset. Your brain records a pattern. The next time you're walking in the savannah and a twig snaps, you don't say, gee, I wonder if, this is from, right? If your genes, if they're doing what they need to do, your brain is doing what it needs to do, it recognizes that and takes action before you even decide. Remember? You're out of there. And if you aren't, your genetic material is now in the saber-toothed tiger's stomach. And those genes don't survive. The genes that survived are the ones that made the pattern, the connection between past events, twig snapping, and actions called get out of here, don't even take time to think about it, it's boom, you're gone. Those of us survived, and we are the descendants of that kind of brain. Yes? Hi. Consistent with this, MRI studies show that virtually the same regions of the brain are active both when we think about the past and when we think about the future. The future, the illusion of choice. Most people think they have lots of choices about their lives. That is, what they can do in the present to realize the future they want. Some even think they have a virtually unlimited opportunity set of these choices. However, this is a delusion. The more we learn about how the brain evolved and the way it functions, the clearer it becomes that our opportunity set of choices for being, thinking, planning, and action in the present is limited to the choices that are consistent with realizing the past-derived future we live into. The illusion that we humans have a good deal of freedom to be, think, plan, and act leaves most people without an incentive to discover a way to transform the grip on the present of the past-derived future we by default live into. Most people go blissfully on living in the illusion of choice, attributing the unworkability in life to just the way life is. This is why the old French proverb says, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Nevertheless, the consequences of the brain by default constraining the future to one derived from the past have made the yearning for leadership as old as humanity. However, as long as for those being led, the freedom to be, think, plan, and act is in the grip of the past-based future they by default live into, they will be looking for a kind of leadership that isn't really leadership at all. To quote Ron Heifetz, constituents. Do you know what constituents are? If you're a politician, the people who support you are your constituents. So, any followers. Constituents expect them, leaders, to provide solutions, security, and meaning. Constituents also demand many variations on these themes: answers, vision, inspiration, hope, consistency, order, direction, and just tell me what to do. It may surprise you that depending on a leader to provide something in the range from vision and inspiration to just tell me what to do is not really leadership. If giving in to what Heifetz lists as what is often expected by followers is leadership, it would be on the lowest rung of leadership. What is important here is to recognize that followers have these expectations of their leaders because they are limited to the possibilities present in the past-derived, almost certain future into which they are living. And this leaves them believing that the only way out is for someone to give them the answer. So you can, just a second, you can see this in some of the quotes that I hear around here. Have you ever heard the quote, "The fish rots from the head down"? Yeah, the fish rots from the head. It's, yeah? And it's said in terms of the leadership of the country. If the leadership is bad, the whole country will rot. Now that's not the truth. It's just somebody talking. But it is interacted with as though it's the truth, and it leaves the people that hear this helpless because they're the tail and they're the rest of the body. The people are the rest of the body. And what they're essentially saying is, we're screwed because the head is rotted. and there's no power in it. But it's just somebody saying something, but this kind of starts to capture it. It's all the future into which many of the citizens in Ukraine are living is called the future in which, well, the head's rotted, so I don't make any difference. I might as well give up. Yeah? Okay. So it leaves them believing that the only way out is someone to give them the answer. Summarize the future. Summarizing the essential points we have made so far. 1. People have various kinds of possible futures they think about, or worry about, or hope for, or strive for. However, given the way the brain functions, the future into which people are living is a future that is given by the past. 3. And the brain generates being in action in the present to be consistent with realizing the future it predicts, that is, a past-derived future. What we know so far about the nature of future, and more important, its impact on your and others' being, emotions, thinking, planning, and action in the present is pretty dismal. By the same token, you can probably start to guess what leadership is about and why in certain conditions or in certain situations leadership is essential for a successful outcome, fulfilling the concerns of the relevant parties. As philosopher Jacques Derrida said, I never give in to the temptation to be difficult, just for the sake of being difficult. That would be too ridiculous. By the same token, he also said, if things are simple, word would have gotten around. We're not making future or anything else in this course difficult for the sake of being difficult. It is just that our prevailing worldview, model of reality, and our prevailing frame of reference, mindset, regarding future make what we are saying about future seem difficult. What we are saying about future is actually simple. By the same token, the actual nature of future is not simple-minded. And so you will have to exercise your intellectual muscle to master the true nature of the simple facts about future. And you do need to master future in order to be a leader. Third, as future as context. As should now be somewhat obvious, the future is the context for the present. Or said more precisely, the future a person is living into is for that person the context for life in the present. That is, both what is so in the present and the possibilities for dealing with what is so occur for that person in the context of the future that person is living into. As we said earlier, the world and the way it works, and others and we ourselves and the way they and we work, all occur for us in some context that limits and shapes both what we can see of them and the way what we see of them occurs for us. And putting this together with what we said in the first paragraph on this slide, the future you and the people you are leading are living into limits and shapes what you and they can see. If what is so in the situation being dealt with, and limits and shapes what you and they can see as possibilities for dealing with what is so in that situation. Is that clear? One never knows what of the conditions in the situation being dealt with, including what possibilities for dealing with those conditions, do not show up for one at all in the prevailing context. And with what does show up, what distortions occur for you and the people you are leading in the way it actually is. This is called being blindsided. And being blindsided is one of the most prevalent destroyers of the effective exercise of leadership. Do you get that? One never knows. What of the conditions? So there's the conditions. There's actually the circumstance. This is probably going to get changed somewhat. There's actually the circumstances and the conditions in which the circumstance exists, right? And they're being dealt with out of some past that you don't realize is in your future that you're living into. And you can't sort out which is which. Can you see the conundrum? We're going to get it sorted out though, right? Okay, if you've been following so far, it should be clear that one way or another, the future that is going to be realized is some variation of the future that you and the people you are leading are living into. The future being lived into is the context in which the present occurs. If that context is the past-derived future from which the brain selects the way of being and acting in the present that will realize the past-derived future, you may have some successful battles, but you will lose the war. In short, no matter what, the context is decisive.
What this?
You will remember that in the definition of leadership as a term, we said that leadership is defined as the realization of a future that wasn't going to happen. And in clarifying wasn't going to happen, we said a future that in the prevailing context did not occur as an authentic possibility. That is, did not call into effective action those required to act in order to realize that future. If the mission can be realized in the context of the future given by the past, that is, if it can be realized by drawing on the past, even if for success it needs something more or better or different, leadership is not required to realize that mission. It will certainly require effective management, but it does not require leadership. If a new context is required, that is, if a future beyond what is possible given by the past is required, that is, if doing more or better or different or even changing is insufficient to realizing success, fulfilling the concerns of the relevant parties, then without leadership, whatever gets done will result in something less than success, because it will be given by the past. Without a new context, that is, without a transformation of the future into which you and the people you are leading are living, the future, when realized, will be more of the same. It may be better, different, or even a change. But no matter what the variation, it will still be more of the past. Remember, the context is decisive. An aside about different kinds of contexts. Earlier in the course, we spoke about and provided you with an opportunity to deal with some of your idiosyncratic contexts. For example, your personal, already, always listening is an idiosyncratic context. It is those idiosyncratic contexts constituted by aspects of your everyday common sense of the worldview and frames of reference and your ontological constraints, which act as barriers to your natural self-expression. By contrast, the conversation we are currently in the process of unfolding regarding the future as a context for the present, rather than being about your idiosyncratic context, is about the kind of context you must master in order to be a leader and exercise leadership effectively as your natural self-expression. It is a part of the contextual framework for leader and leadership. What makes this all so dismal is the fact that the prevailing context is the future people are living into, and the future that people are living into is by default derived from and shaped by the past. Remember, the context is decisive. That means that in the default context, people's being in action in the present will result in more of the same. It may be more, better, different, or a change, but it will still be some variation of the past. And that is why leadership matters. What does leader and leadership as a concept look like on the court? Find in your own experience future as goal or strive for, future as worried about, future as dreamt of, and hope for a future. See if you can find any other futures you experience. Discover in your own experience that the future being lived into is the context in which the present occurs. So leader and leadership as concepts. Be able to say the following as your own and be able to tell someone else what it looks like on the court. As concept, leader and leadership as a concept. Leader and leadership exist in the temporal domain of a created future, a future that fulfills the concerns of the relevant parties that the leader and those being led come to live into. Which future gives them being in action in the present, consistent with realizing that future. Okay, what did you discover in completing that assignment? You went on break, you came back. What are you discovering in having completed that assignment? Anything? How about what ifs, and yeah, but, and anything like that? What does it look like on the court? Do you get the idea that in any kind of normal endeavor, the past is so coercive that it gets in our future. It's so convincing. It's so omnipresent. It gets in our future, and we deal with what we're dealing with through that future, and not through any new breakthrough thinking. But it looks like we're going to solve the problem because we have some new ideas. But those new ideas are given by the past, which are going to give you more of the past. Maybe a little bit better or a little different version, but more of the past nonetheless.
So what is the solution?
Huh?
Is there a solution? Because it seems that future depends only on our past.
Well, yeah, you're in the leadership course. I mean, we're going to have... So you need to see this, and you need to know that this is
Effect.
the coin of the realm. Do you know what the coin of the realm is? The grivnia is the coin of the coin of the realm. It's what we traffic in, We trade in this. But it's almost like you don't know that anything, until you see that it's the coin of the realm, it's a blind spot until you see.
Okay, we see that past depends on our future. Our future depends on our past, and the point is how we can change it, because we can't change our past.
Right. We're going to talk about it. We don't want to change anything.
Okay.
But if we want to have a good future, how we can occur for this
We can
How can you
create
alter
this.
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we're going to see. We're not going to change anything or make anything different or anything better. But first we need to know that this is how it operates.
Yeah.
Is the past is in the future.
Mhm.
And we're living in the present into that future,
Which would
pretending that we're not in, right? Pretending that that's not happening. But now we see, oh, I see. We always take our past because we're wired to survive. Our brain recognizes patterns persistently and consistently. We recognize patterns, and we have that pattern recognizing mechanism that we're dealing with the future. And it's just going to give us another variation of the past because we're using that pattern. Yeah? It has to give us another variation of the past because we're using a pattern to deal with it. It may give us a little better version or a different version, but then that's you can use management for that. You don't need leadership. So what we're going to start working at is, well, how can we get that and put it back there? We're going to be looking at that. Clarifying created future. Obviously, a future derived from the past is anything but a created future. A future that is invented. And leadership exists in the temporal domain of a created future. A future derived from the past can be, as we said, different in various ways from the past, but it will not be created. Rather, it will be an extension of the past. But it will not, or at least in some way extrapolated from the past. And extensions and extrapolations are changes, not creations. While the past-derived future is the almost certain future that serves as the context for the present, remember, there is no certain future. While it's almost certain, it's still only almost certain. And that's the good news. That is, even the almost certain future is not certain. It's only almost certain. As we said earlier, we can create contexts that leave us empowered and enabled. You've done that. And here, you've practiced creating contexts in which you listen for contribution. Remember doing that? It created a context. It gave you a different life. And what you did is you took your judgments and evaluations, which are given by the past, yeah? You bracketed them. You took them and put them in the past. And it gave you a different future. And you could actually create a future called, who is that person as a contribution? So you actually kind of already did some of this. But we're now going to give you, when we did that, it almost happened like an accident. It's like, wow, what was that? But we're going to give you, put your hands on the levers and the dials of that whole mechanism. Okay, so it doesn't occur like, oh wow, what is that? It was an accident. All right? Did I read all this? And here, as we said, no? Did I stop? And here, the context we were speaking about leaves us empowered and enabled is a created future. That's what you did. You created a future. A future that people come to live into that gives them being and action in the present that realizes that created future. That future that wasn't going to happen